Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we journey back to a time when kings spoke with gods and rivers whispered secrets to those who would listen. A time when the stars hung close to the earth and dreams shaped the course of life. In the land between two rivers, where the first cities rose from clay and song, there lived a man whose story has echoed softly through the ages. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Half divine, half mortal, stronger than any, yet seeking something no strength could bring. This is not a tale of war or conquest. It is the quiet telling of a journey, of friendship, of sorrow, of wonder, of walking through cedar forests and listening to the wind, of dreams that flicker like lanterns, and of the soft truths found not in power, but in the spaces between breath. So close your eyes. Let the ancient sands cradle your thoughts. Let the river's current carry you gently. And together, we will follow the whispers of Uruk into the quiet heart of the world's oldest story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to subscribe and like the video, but only if you enjoy what I do here. And write in the comments from where you are and what time it is. Now turn off the lights and fan for the soft background hum. And let's get into the night journey together. Welcome, dear listener. Let us begin with silence. The kind that lingers just after the winds have passed over the rooftops. The kind that rests gently on sun-baked stone and in the shadowed corners of ancient streets. We find ourselves in Uruk, cradle of kings, city of reeds and temples, where the gods once walked alongside men, and time moved as slowly as the Tigris at dawn. Before the tales of heroes, before the thunder of war or the sigh of mourning, there were walls. Massive, towering, and warm with the memory of 1,000 hands. The walls of Uruk stand like a hymn of mud brick in time. They were not raised in haste. No, each brick was molded from the river's silt, dried in the patient sun, and set in place by men who sang as they worked. Their songs, now lost to dust, once floated up between scaffolds and scaffolding like prayers. Walk with me, not quickly. Let us take our time. The walls encircle the city in measured loops, embracing temples, markets, and courtyards, all swaying gently in the rhythm of Mesopotamia's heat. On a clear afternoon, the walls shimmer faintly, golden with sun, and faint streaks of salt from old rains run like veins across their surfaces. Lichen clings here and there, softening edges sharpened by centuries. There are gates, 5 of them, each carved with careful dedication, each a threshold not just between inside and out, but between the mundane and the sacred. Through one pass traders with carts of barley and fish, wheels creaking against cobbles worn smooth. Through another, priests emerge, wrapped in linen, bearing incense and water drawn from holy wells. Beyond the gates lie streets, twisting, narrow things, paved with uneven stones and lined with homes of mud brick. Children chase goats through their winding paths. A baker calls out softly to a friend passing by. Overhead, laundry hangs from rooftop to rooftop, swaying like flags in a breeze too shy to be named. And above it all, on the highest rise, stands the ziggurat, the temple of Anu in Ishtar, built not just of bricks but of belief. Its terraces rise in solemn tiers, and on its topmost platform, priests light fires at dusk, sending their orange glow into the waiting sky. But today we do not climb. Today we wait by the wall. Here, where a fig tree casts speckled shade and bees hover over wildflowers, sits Gilgamesh. He is not as you might expect. Not yet. Not the hero of cedar forests, not the weaver of dreams or seeker of immortality. He is a king, yes. But today he wears no crown, and there are no spears at his side. Only a simple robe, linen dyed a soft gray, and a pair of sandals worn from pacing stone paths too often. His brow is furrowed, not in anger, in thought. He watches the people of Uruk move beneath him, slow, methodical, timeless. A woman pours water into a clay basin. A potter shapes a bowl on a wheel that spins with hypnotic steadiness. A scribe balances a tablet on his knees, etching cuneiform with the tip of a reed. Gilgamesh sees them all. And yet, he feels apart. His hands are calloused from war and work, but his heart stirs restlessly. Each morning, he wakes earlier. Each evening, he lingers longer in silence. The city he rules hums with life, but he listens for something more. From behind him, an old servant approaches. He does not speak. He only kneels and offers a small clay cup of barley beer. Gilgamesh accepts it with a nod, his gaze never leaving the street below. The servant departs, his footsteps soft against the dust. And then, for a moment, the wind shifts. It carries with it the scent of damp earth from the riverbanks, a faint trace of tamarisk blossoms, the sound of temple bells from the inner quarter, barely audible. Gilgamesh closes his eyes and listens, as though hoping the wind might bring answers from gods who no longer speak aloud. He remembers dreams, vague, lingering shapes that slip away upon waking, of stars falling, of mountains bowing, of someone equal and unfamiliar walking beside him. He has told no one, not even the scribes. The priests would speak of omens. The court would whisper of madness. And yet, the dreams persist. The sun begins its descent, spilling amber light across the wall tops. The bricks glow. The air cools. Shadows lengthen. A dove lands near Gilgamesh, cooing softly as it pecks at a crust of bread left behind. He does not move. The bird, unconcerned, flutters away, wings brushing air like the soft sigh of fabric. In the distance, the river gleams like liquid silver. Boats drift past, their sails like pale ghosts in the waning light. Somewhere far off, a child sings. And slowly, as the stars begin to prick the deepening sky, Gilgamesh rises. He touches the wall with one hand, the rough surface warm still from the day's heat. His fingers linger. These walls will outlast him. That he knows. And yet, for all their permanence, they hold no answers. He turns, robes whispering against the stone, and walks back toward the city. Lamps are being lit. Fires tended. Sleep will come to Uruk soon. But for Gilgamesh, rest remains distant. The wind stirs once more. And behind him, the walls of Uruk stand silent and steady, holding within them a king who dreams of something more. It falls like velvet over rooftops and courtyards, casting shadows that lengthen and curl into the corners of quiet rooms. Lamps flicker behind mud brick windows. Dogs stir, then settle again. The scent of olive oil, burnt wicks, and cool clay drifts through the narrow streets. In the palace, torches glow low in wall niches. Servants pad silently across polished stone floors. Somewhere, someone hums a lullaby to a restless infant. Elsewhere, the court scribes finish their tablets for the day, stacking them gently to dry beside the walls, where the breeze moves slow as honey. And in the upper chambers, above the hush of the city, sleeps Gilgamesh. He sleeps fitfully. His body rests beneath a linen sheet, woven thin and embroidered with symbols of Ishtar's stars. The bed is wide, carved from cedar, but it feels empty. The air is cool, yet Gilgamesh turns, disturbed not by heat, but by something deeper, something stirring in the still pool of his thoughts. And then, the dream begins. He is walking, not in Uruk, but beyond. The walls are gone, the city a memory. Dust swirls around his feet. The sky is vast, too vast, like the heavens have widened to swallow the world. Above him, stars burn brighter than fire. They shimmer like gods watching from beyond the firmament. And one begins to fall. Slowly at first, like a leaf, then swifter, brighter. A star, no, a stone. A presence, heavy, radiant. It lands near him, shaking the earth with a soundless weight. Gilgamesh approaches, and the thing rises. It does not speak, but he feels its knowing. Feels that it is his equal, his companion, his mirror. He reaches out, and then he wakes. Not with a start, not with fear, but with the quiet gasp of a man surfacing from deep water. The lamp is still lit, burning low. A moth flutters silently near the flame. Outside, the city breathes in sleep, but Gilgamesh lies awake, eyes open to the dark. He does not call for a servant. He does not rise. He only listens to the hush of woven curtains swaying in the breeze, to the rustle of fig leaves beyond the window, to the soft groan of the wooden beams above. He knows the dream will not fade. As dawn approaches, he rises and walks the hallways barefoot. The stone is cool beneath his feet. He moves like a shadow, unbothered by the startled glances of guards or servants kneeling in his path. He descends to the temple courtyard, where the first rays of sunlight gild the steps with gold. There, beneath the statue of Anu, god of the sky, he kneels not in formal prayer, but in quiet reflection. A priest arrives, draped in pale linen, eyes still heavy with sleep. Gilgamesh speaks slowly, describing what he saw, each detail wrapped in silence. The priest listens. Then he bows. "A friend will come," he says, voice soft as a breeze. "From the wild. A balance, not made of city stone, but of earth and wind." Gilgamesh says nothing. The priest continues. "Two shall walk where one has walked, and the path will shift beneath their feet." Gilgamesh nods once. Then he rises. Above them, the sun begins to climb the sky. The light is pale, not yet harsh. Birds wheel lazily overhead. In the distance, the river glints like a serpent at rest. He returns to the palace slowly, walking through the waking streets. The marketplace is stirring. Merchants lift woven awnings. Bakers fan the fires of clay ovens. Children dart through alleyways chasing hens that squawk and flap indignantly. Everything begins again, as it always does. And yet, for Gilgamesh, something has changed. He pauses beneath an archway and watches as a boy balances a jug of water on his head. A woman weaves rushes into baskets. Two old men argue gently over the price of salt. The world is the same, but in his heart, the dream pulses like a quiet drum. That night, the dream returns. This time, it is the mountain, towering, golden, alive with flame. Gilgamesh climbs, slowly, barefoot on stone. Winds whip around him, carrying voices not threatening, but familiar. He reaches the summit, and there again is the figure, the presence, watching, waiting. Gilgamesh extends a hand. He awakens in darkness, sweat on his brow, and the certainty in his chest growing. He does not understand it fully, not yet, but he knows this. The gods have stirred. Something is coming. Someone. And as the sun spills once again over the rooftops of Uruk, Gilgamesh stands on the palace terrace, watching the streets below. Waiting, not as a king, but as a man who has glimpsed something more in the folds of night. Far from Uruk, beyond the carved gates and farmlands that stretch like woven cloth across the plains, beyond the ox paths and irrigation ditches and reed-roofed huts, there is land untouched by city walls. There are no scribes here, no priests, no carved brick or measured chants. Only silence and the low hush of wine through the tall grasses. This is the land of animals, of streams that do not know the names of kings, of cliffs worn smooth by time alone. Here, beneath a sky that changes only with the seasons, something stirs. He is not born in the way men are born, not to a mother's song or swaddling cloth. Enkidu arises from the dust like a whisper shaped by divine breath. His body is strong, hairy, broad-shouldered, bare of robe or ring. His eyes are wide, dark, curious. He does not speak. There is no need. He drinks with the gazelles. He eats wild grass and sweet figs from the low trees. Birds do not fear him. Foxes curl beside him. He walks softly through the undergrowth, and the world does not recoil. He is of it. The animals know this. The trees, too. At night, he sleeps beneath the stars, untroubled. His dreams are not shaped by ambition or regret. They are of wind, of water, of the moon's silver journey over still ponds. He wakes slowly, with the sun warming his back, stretching like a lion. And so time passes. Softly, he roams the steppe and drinks at the banks of the river, cupping water with his hands. When a shepherd's snare catches a hare, he frees it. When a trap disturbs a bird's nest, he dismantles it gently. His presence becomes legend among the herdsmen. Some fear him. Others kneel in reverence when they spot him at a distance, mistaking him for a god of the wild. But word travels. In Uruk, the hunters speak of this wild man who runs with beasts and frees game from their nets. They come before the king, kneeling, hesitant. Gilgamesh listens, eyes narrowed, not in anger, but recognition. The dreams, the mountain, the falling star. He nods once, dismisses them, and sends for Shamhat. She is not just a priestess, but something older, a keeper of words, of gestures, of sacred rhythms passed from temple to temple. She wears fine linen and walks with bare feet. Her voice is low and slow. When she moves, it is like the ripple of cloth in still air. You will find him, Gilgamesh says. You will wait, and he will come. Shamhat bows. She asks no questions. The journey to the grasslands takes many days. She travels with a hunter and 2 goats for milk, but she walks most of the way. When they reach the waterhole where the wild man is said to drink, she sends the others away. She waits, not impatiently, not anxiously. She sits by the stream's edge, braiding grasses into loops. She hums lullabies to no one in particular. The goats graze. The water sparkles. The reeds sway. And on the 3rd morning, just before the sun crests the hills, he comes. Enkidu steps from the brush, barefooted, his hair tangled, his skin kissed by sun and dust. He pauses, watching her. His eyes are curious but calm, not like a beast, nor like a man. Somewhere in between. Shamhat does not rise. She smiles and pours water into a clay bowl. She sets dates upon a cloth. She does not beckon. She only waits. Enkidu approaches slowly. He sits, eats, drinks. They do not speak. There are no words yet, but there is understanding, the warmth of shared presence, the stillness between breaths. She sings softly, a melody like wind through reeds. Days pass. He stays. They eat together. They rest. He listens as she speaks the names of things: sky, tree, hand, water, sun. He repeats them, carefully. She teaches him to grind barley between stones, to shape it into cakes. He helps her gather wood for the fire. She shows him how to wrap linen around his waist. He watches her. She watches him, not with judgment, but wonder. When he sleeps beside her, it is not with desire, but peace. A new rhythm enters his body, a stillness, but also a yearning. He begins to dream, strangely, of temples, of ziggurats, of lions and stars, of a city with high walls and the sound of distant drums. On the 7th day, the animals come. They see him, but they do not approach. The gazelles flee. The jackal turns and vanishes into the brush. A heron flaps its wings and lifts into the wide sky. Enkidu watches, confused. He calls out, softly, but they do not return. The wild no longer knows him. He kneels, unsure. Shamhat places a hand on his shoulder. You are no longer only of them, she says. You are also of us. He does not speak, but nods. Together, they begin the journey to Uruk. The path is long. They pass through dry valleys, green ditches, villages of reed huts, and date palms. Enkidu marvels at each. A boy carrying water in a jug, an old woman weaving beneath a tree, a donkey braying in the heat. Each sight is new. Each sound is strange and sacred. And beyond the final hill, the city rises. Uruk, broad and shining in the afternoon sun, its walls like honeyed stone, its towers reaching for the sky. Enkidu stands beside Shamhat, eyes wide. He does not speak. And within the city, on the palace terrace, Gilgamesh looks up. He feels it. The star has fallen. The dream has taken form. And so, without a word, the paths of 2 men begin to bend toward each other, slowly, like rivers seeking the sea. She walked without haste. Across the plain where the grasses swayed like threads beneath the morning wind, down the narrow paths carved by deer hooves and shepherd's feet, and along the edge of the river that whispered to itself in long, slow vowels. Shamhat did not carry a banner or call attention. She was not there to conquer, nor even to persuade. She was there to witness. The priestess moved through the wilderness not as a stranger, but as someone returning to a place half remembered. She listened as she walked, listened to birdsong, to the lap of water on the riverbank, to the rustling hush of fig leaves in the dry wind. Her sandals left only the faintest print in the dust. In her satchel, she carried bread and dates wrapped in linen. On her wrist hung a small clay jar of oil, and around her neck, a cord with 3 beads, lapis, carnelian, and white shell. Not tokens of power, but of balance. She was a daughter of the temple, and the temple was older than kings. By evening, she reached the grove. It was a quiet place. A spring fed a low pool there, circled by tamarisk trees and patches of feathered grass. A few goats, half wild, grazed among the stones. The air smelled of mint and water reeds. She knelt and drank, cupping the coolness in her palms. Then she waited. The hunter who guided her had already gone. There would be no audience, no assembly. Just a woman beside a pool and the wild men who might come. She sat, cross-legged, beneath a low tree. The branches shaded her from the sun. She watched as the day faded to bronze, then indigo. Frogs chirped from the shallows. Fireflies rose in gentle, pulsing flight. Still, she did not move. And then, sometime near dawn, he appeared. Enkidu came from the brush slowly, noiseless as a shadow. His hair was thick and unbound. His eyes, wide and deep, caught the light like polished stone. His shoulders moved with the ease of deer, and his breath rose in slow clouds in the morning chill. He stood for a long time, not out of fear, not out of confusion, but as if watching something sacred. Shamhat did not rise. She met his gaze with quiet certainty, neither drawing him in nor keeping him away. She reached to her side and set a piece of flatbread on a smooth stone between them. Beside it, a figure. Then, she resumed her stillness. Enkidu watched. The birds around him did not startle. A breeze passed, tugging gently at the edges of her linen robe. And after a time, he stepped forward, crouched, and took the bread. They did not speak. Over the next days, they shared the same rhythm, rising with the sun, sitting in silence, bathing in the stream. She sang as she ground grain with a stone, shaping it into cakes beneath her hands. He watched, head tilted. When she hummed, his breath matched hers. When she smiled, his gaze lingered. Slowly, the space between them began to change. She spoke names, softly. Tree, sky, river, stone, and he repeated them, voice gravelly, curious. Each word felt like a new branch reaching from within him. Each syllable a root pressing into the soil of something unseen. At night, they lay beneath the same sky, a few handspans apart. The stars turned overhead, slow and ancient. Owls called in the distance. In sleep, his dreams began to shift. Where once there had been only clouds and animals and light, now there were shapes, walls, rooftops, fires, and always a face watching his. He awoke with questions in his eyes, but no words. Not yet. She answered without speaking. Her hands showed him how to grind barley, how to tie a cord around a bundle of reeds, how to pour water from a clay jug without spilling. She offered a robe of woven linen. He hesitated, then wrapped it around his shoulders. The first time he saw his reflection in the still pool, he knelt for a long time. He touched his cheek, his mouth, his beard. The man he saw was not beast nor bird. He was something in between, something becoming. On the sixth morning, as the sun rose like a golden yoke over the hills, the animals came again. A small herd of gazelles paused near the edge of the grove. Enkidu turned to them, smiling. He stepped forward, arm raised. But they turned and fled, not in panic, but with purpose, as if they no longer recognized him. The birds flew up. A hare darted into the grass. Only silence remained. He looked back at Shamhat, lost. She stood and came to him. Her hand found his. She placed his palm over his own chest. "You are changed," she said, "and the wild no longer holds you." He lowered his gaze, but then she lifted his chin, gently, and smiled. "You are still whole," she said. "Now you belong to the world of men." That day, they began walking. She led him along the edge of the river, then across the low hills. Villages appeared, small and smoky. Children stared at him. Dogs barked once, then fell quiet. Old women whispered, recognizing the wild in him, and the softness Shamhat had woven into his steps. Enkidu saw walls for the first time. A roof of stone, a garden enclosed, a jar shaped by hands, a temple, a doorway, and on the final hill, Uruk rose before them. The walls stretched across the horizon, warm in the sun. The towers caught the light. Palm trees swayed within. The sound of flutes and hammers drifted upward. People moved like rivers, in loops and lines and laughter. Enkidu stood still, his breath caught not from fear, but from awe. The city seemed alive, breathing in the morning light. He did not understand it, but something in him recognized it, as if he had dreamed of it long ago, in the time before he had language. Shamhat stood beside him. "There is a king within," she said. "He dreams, too, of stars, of you." Enkidu did not speak, but his feet moved forward. And so, step by step, the wild man entered the city of men, not as a stranger, but as something the city had forgotten it needed. The first breath of morning in Uruk comes not with trumpets, but with quiet rituals. A mother stirs the ashes in her hearth and adds a handful of dry twigs. A pot of barley simmers slowly over the fire. Somewhere across the rooftops, a pigeon coos, and temple bells begin their distant chiming, slow, steady, like a lullaby turned inside out. The sky, once indigo, warms to a gentle ochre. In the marketplace, shadows still cling to the corners. The stalls are mostly empty, save for a few vendors setting out dates on woven mats, rubbing clay jars with damp cloths, or cracking jokes in low voices. The scent of flatbread baking wafts in from the alleys. Time moves slowly here, and into this rhythm steps Enkidu. He walks with careful feet, wrapped now in woven linen, his hair combed and tied behind his neck. His eyes take in everything, wide, alert, not with suspicion, but with reverence. The city is loud compared to the wilderness, yet its noise does not trouble him. It is the sound of life, of footsteps over stone, of wool turning against clay, of water pouring into jars. He passes a woman balancing fish in a wide basket, a boy holding a lamb by a woven rope, a scribe dictating aloud to a sleepy apprentice who yawns behind his stylus. Enkidu sees it all, hears it all, and moves gently through it like a breeze through hanging laundry. People notice him. They stop, mid-step, to look again. There is something unusual about the way he walks, barefoot, tall, with shoulders like carved cedar and eyes that do not flinch. Some whisper, some nod silently. Word spreads. The wild man is here. The one the hunter spoke of. The one the priests dreamed of. A man made of earth and sky, who drinks from streams and walks with lions. But Enkidu notices none of this. He is too busy watching. The colors of dyed wool hanging on a line. The curve of a pot just removed from the kiln. The way a butcher sprinkles salt across a piece of meat. The grains catching sunlight before falling. These small things draw him like stars to a sea. He stops at a basket of figs and reaches out, hesitantly. The vendor, an old woman with a kerchief tied around her hair, offers him one without charge. He bows in thanks. She does not speak, but her eyes soften. And nearby, unseen, Gilgamesh is watching. He stands at the edge of the market beneath the shadow of a date palm. Cloaked in gray linen, unadorned, his presence goes unmarked. His gaze is fixed not on traders or goods, but on the stranger, on the man who moves like a poem remembered from childhood. He had not known what to expect. The dreams had spoken in riddles. The priests had offered metaphors. But now, seeing Enkidu in the flesh, watching him taste a fig with the quiet care of someone meeting the fruit for the first time, Gilgamesh feels something stir. Not rivalry, not threat, but recognition. He steps forward, slowly, through the small crowd gathering near the well. Enkidu hears the change in rhythm, the hush, the pulling back, and turns. Their eyes meet. The world, for a moment, stills. No one speaks. No bells ring. Even the wind holds its breath. Two men, bound by dreams, stand face to face in a market full of motion. One born of city stone, the other of open plains. One crowned, the other barefoot. One with memory, the other newly made. But in their gazes, there is no fear, only understanding. Gilgamesh tilts his head. Enkidu does the same. A smile tugs at the edge of the king's mouth, not wide, not prideful, but slow, like a door creaking open in an old house. Enkidu mirrors it, faintly. It is the first time he has smiled since leaving the grove. They do not speak. Words, for now, would only bruise the moment. Instead, Gilgamesh gestures, small and unobtrusive, toward a shaded corner of the square, where a clay bench rests beneath hanging vines. Enkidu follows. They sit. A servant approaches with water in a polished bowl. Another brings bread, warm from the oven. The men eat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, sharing food as equals, not king and subject, not stranger and host, but as men who understand the weight of breath and the silence between dreams. Around them, life resumes. Children run. A dog barks. The hammering of a carpenter rises in rhythm. But in that corner, beneath the vines, something rare has begun. They begin to speak, not of war or glory, but of simple things. Gilgamesh points to a bird nesting beneath a roof beam. Enkidu nods, naming it. Gilgamesh speaks of the river's bends. Enkidu traces it with his finger in the dust. They laugh once, gently, when a fig falls directly into Enkidu's lap, and he eats it without hesitation. It is the beginning of something. Not merely friendship. Not yet. But resonance. Gilgamesh, who once paced the walls of Uruk in restless longing, now sits still. And Enkidu, who once chased jackals beneath the stars, now finds joy in shade and bread. They will leave this square together. They will walk through Uruk's alleys. They will visit temples. They will speak with wise men and old women. And eventually they will walk beyond the city walls into stories yet untold. But for now, they are simply two men in the marketplace, eating figs, drinking water, and letting the city breathe around them. There were no trumpets, no crowd pressed against the city walls, no grand declarations or ceremonial processions. Only two figures walking side by side beneath the early sky, their sandals tapping softly on the stone road that led eastward, toward the horizon where the sun slowly spilled gold across the earth. Gilgamesh wore a cloak of pale linen. Enkidu, beside him, carried nothing but a staff cut from tamarisk wood. They had been speaking of dreams again, ones of gates that opened on their own, of shadows that bent toward them as if bowing. But now they said little. The silence between them was not empty. It was peaceful, full, the silence of those who walk without the need to fill the air. They passed the outer gardens of Uruk, where orchard trees bowed under the weight of ripening dates. Farmers moved slowly between rows, humming to themselves, brushing dust from leaves with soft cloths. A boy herding goats paused, blinking at the sight of the two travelers. One of them, he recognized from whispered tales, the man with lion shoulders and starborn eyes. The other, the wild man from the hills. The boy said nothing, only watched, as if witnessing something old and sacred. Beyond the gardens lay open land. Fields of barley swayed in the wind like silk banners. Canals crisscrossed the plain, water murmuring in shallow channels. Birds lifted into the air as the men passed, egrets, herons, and once, a hawk. Gilgamesh paused to watch its slow spiral. Enkidu smiled faintly. "The sky always watches," he said. It was one of his sayings. By midday, they reached a grove where the shade was thick and dappled. They sat beside a stream, sharing bread and lentils packed in a linen pouch. The water was clear, and they cupped it in their hands, drinking without speaking. Gilgamesh, who had once commanded battalions, now sat cross-legged, watching an ant crawl across a fig leaf. Enkidu leaned back, head resting against the bark of a tree, eyes closed, listening to the wind. The road ahead would lead them beyond the familiar, to lands whispered of by merchants and scribes, to the place where the cedar forest grew. Not the small, spindly trees of the riverbanks, but towering, ancient trunks that reached like fingers into the sky. The forest of Humbaba. They did not speak of him yet. Not out of fear, but out of respect. As they continued walking, the landscape began to shift. The air grew cooler. Hills rose like sleeping animals from the earth. Rocks jutted from the soil like ancient teeth. The green grew denser. Trees, taller. The road narrowed into a trail, and the birds sang differently now. Louder, but more distant, like they watched from deeper canopies. One evening, they arrived at the edge of the forest. It did not appear all at once. Rather, it revealed itself slowly, like a memory surfacing from the dark. The trees were thick-barked and wide, their roots rising from the soil like ribs. The scent of resin filled the air, sweet, sharp, unfamiliar. The wind no longer passed cleanly through. It curled around trunks, whispered in low tones. The forest breathed. Gilgamesh stopped. Before them, the path vanished beneath a green shadow. He looked up. The canopy blocked the sun, but golden light still filtered down in long, slanted beams. Dust motes floated within them, like stars drifting through underwater space. "It feels old," he said quietly. Enkidu nodded. "It is." They camped that night at the forest's edge. Their fire crackled softly, its smoke rising into the dark like incense. Owls called from somewhere high above. Gilgamesh turned over a smooth stone in his hand, the firelight dancing across its surface. "Why does the forest need a guardian?" he asked. Enkidu stirred the coals gently. "Not to protect it from us," he said, "but to protect us from it." Gilgamesh did not respond, but his gaze lingered on the darkness beyond the tree line. They slept in turns that night. When Gilgamesh dreamed, he saw a great gate opening slowly, its hinges groaning like mountains shifting in their sleep. A voice called to him, not in warning, but in invitation. When morning came, they entered the forest, step by step. The ground was soft, layered with needles and fallen leaves. The air was thick with the scent of cedar and earth. Light passed through in slivers, never fully illuminating. It felt like twilight, even at midday. They walked for hours. Sometimes they paused to listen, hearing the creak of branches, the crackle of undergrowth, the distant murmur of water. Once, a stag crossed their path and stopped to look at them, not startled, simply curious. Then it vanished, soundlessly, into the green. Gilgamesh placed his hand on the trunk of one of the great trees. It was warm, alive. He closed his eyes. There was something ancient here, something that did not care for men or cities or crowns. Not in anger, simply in indifference. The forest had watched empires rise and fall like dust on the wind. It remembered things the cities had forgotten. That night, they did not light a fire. They slept beneath the canopy, their blankets pulled close, stars hidden behind layers of leaf. The forest spoke in slow creaks and soft rustles. A branch groaned somewhere above. A fox padded past, unnoticed. Sleep came like mist. In the hours before dawn, Gilgamesh woke. He sat up and looked around. Enkidu slept, his face calm. The trees stood, tall and motionless. Yet something stirred within Gilgamesh, not fear, but awe. He understood now why the forest had a guardian. It was not to keep people out. It was because the forest itself was sacred, and the hearts of men were too loud. There are forests that echo with the sound of birds, where branches sway gently and sunlight filters through in gold-threaded lace. And then there are the deep forests, the ones that do not sing, but murmur, where every tree seems to lean closer than the last, and the air does not drift, but hangs. This was such a forest. Gilgamesh and Enkidu moved slowly now, not out of fear, but reverence. The cedar forest was unlike any place they had ever known. The trees rose impossibly high, their trunks wide enough to shelter entire families beneath their shade. Their branches did not rustle, they whispered, as though passing ancient secrets from one to another in a language only they remembered. The light was dim, but not cold. Warm shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy in rare places, illuminating patches of mossy earth like altars. Ferns unfurled beside twisted roots. Vines crept silently between bark and stone. And overhead, the silence was not empty, it was thick with watching. They did not speak. The forest listened. The path became softer. Their feet no longer struck stone, but sank into loam. Enkidu walked first, his instincts still half-shaped by wilderness. His eyes scanned the underbrush. His ears twitched at every distant crack and creak. Yet even he felt small here, like a guest invited into a home too grand to comprehend. Gilgamesh followed, quiet. His usual confidence was tempered now. The king who had once walked the walls of Uruk with measured pride now walked humbly among trees older than cities, older than stories. They passed fallen trunks wide as irrigation canals. Roots twisted like coiled serpents. Fungi glowed faintly in the shaded hollows, pale as moonlight. It was not frightening, but it was vast. The kind of vastness that made one feel as though the world was far older than any map dared show. By midday, they reached a clearing. There, the trees circled like guardians, tall and unmoving. In the center, a single cedar stood alone, broader than all the rest, its bark silvered with age. A stream curled around its roots, and a small stone altar sat near the base, untouched, but clearly shaped by hands long gone. They sat there, not to rest, but to listen. The wind moved through the branches in long, low sighs. And in that wind, the trees began to speak. Not in words, not in voices, but in sensation. Gilgamesh felt it first, a pressure in his chest, a weight behind his eyes. Then came images, not sharp, but soft, like dreams. Hands building the first fire, a woman planting the first barley, a river changing course under a blood-red moon. The forest whispered of time, of the long before, of the gods who once walked in shadow and wore no faces, of beasts with no names, of the first hunter who raised a spear and the first death that stained the ground. Enkidu bowed his head. He, too, heard, but what he felt was different. For him, the forest was not a story, but a mother. It had raised him in its silent embrace. Now it mourned, not for him, but for what he was becoming, for what he had left behind. The trees remembered him. They did not scold, but they did not welcome. You have stepped away, they seemed to say. You have chosen the world of men. And he had. He opened his eyes, and beside him, Gilgamesh sat still, lips parted slightly, as if listening to a lullaby from long ago. A bird cried out high above, a single, clear note. Then silence returned. I feel them, Gilgamesh said softly. Yes, Enkidu replied. They remember everything. The stream burbled quietly. Gilgamesh rose and stepped toward the great cedar. He placed his palm against the bark. It was warm, alive. He closed his eyes. His breath slowed. The dreams had brought him here. Not to conquer, not to build, but to understand. And standing before the tree, he felt, for the first time, that perhaps the journey was not toward a battle, but toward stillness. He turned to Enkidu. Why does it feel like the forest grieves? Enkidu did not answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, because we carry the noise of cities into the silence of trees. They stayed there for a long time. They did not eat. They did not speak again. They simply listened, to the creaking limbs above, to the trickle of water, to the distant groan of wood shifting under its own weight. And beneath it all, something deeper, a heartbeat, slow and vast, pulsing through the roots beneath their feet. That night, they did not sleep. They lay with their backs to the earth and watched what little sky the branches allowed. The stars came slowly, flickering in fragments. An owl passed silently overhead. A beetle crawled across Gilgamesh's hand, and he did not move. In the space between breaths, he felt it, that life continued not because of kings or temples or names carved into stone, but because the forest still remembered how to breathe. Morning came slowly to the cedar forest, not in a rush of brightness, but in a gradual shifting of light, a softening of shadow, a single bird calling, then another, their songs like droplets falling into a still pool. The sun barely pierced the canopy. Instead, it filtered through in dim golden shafts, illuminating patches of moss, the edges of leaves, the sleeping forms of two travelers resting beneath a veil of silence. Gilgamesh opened his eyes first. He did not stir. He lay still, listening. Somewhere nearby, water moved across stones in a quiet stream. A breeze turned gently through the branches above. His dreams from the night still echoed faintly. Images of gates, of trees uprooting themselves, of a voice that came not from above, but from deep beneath the ground. Beside him, Enkidu remained asleep, his face calm. The forest, for the moment, held its breath. But something was shifting, not in the sky, nor in the underbrush, but in the trees themselves. As Gilgamesh sat up, Brushing dew from his arms, he noticed it. The birds had gone silent. The wind no longer whispered. Even the stream seemed to hesitate. The hush was too complete. It was the kind of silence that carries weight. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something vast. He looked to Enkidu, and Enkidu opened his eyes. Their gaze met, and neither man spoke. They knew. Somewhere, not far ahead, a presence was waking. Enkidu stood slowly, brushing pine needles from his linen robe. His bare feet pressed into the damp soil. Gilgamesh followed, hand resting lightly on the hilt of the axe strapped to his side. They moved together now, more slowly than before, following a path that was not carved, but felt, drawn forward by something unseen, like a current beneath the surface of still water. The trees grew denser, their bark darker, their limbs thicker. Roots twisted across the trail, slowing their steps. The air thickened, filled with the scent of resin and ancient wood. Sunlight had all but vanished now. In its place, shadow and the quiet rhythm of breath. And then they saw it. The gate. It rose from the earth as if grown, not built. Two towering trunks, joined by a lintel carved with symbols neither man could read. The wood was not dead. It pulsed faintly with life, like veins beneath skin. Vines crept across its surface, but did not cover the carvings. The air here was cool. Still, Enkidu placed his hand on the gate. It did not open, but the forest answered. A groan, low, deep, like the shifting of mountains, rumbled through the roots beneath their feet. Birds scattered from hidden branches. A wind stirred the trees. The moss lifted from the trunks like breath rising. And then, from deep within the woods, a voice. It did not speak in words. It moved through the bones, through the soil, through the marrow of the trees. It said, "Who enters with breath heavy and heart full of fire?" Gilgamesh stepped forward. "I am Gilgamesh," he said, "son of Uruk. I come not to destroy the forest, but to face the truth of it." The wind hissed. "And the one beside you?" The voice murmured. Enkidu bowed his head. "I am of this place," he said, "but I have chosen the path of men." There was a pause, a silence that settled not only in the air, but in the mind. "Then you seek to pass. Then you must face the guardian." And the gate creaked open, not with violence, not with force, but with age, slowly, as though reluctant to allow what was to come. The path beyond it was darker still, thick with shadow, lined with thorns, heavy with expectation. They stepped through, and there, in the clearing beyond, stood the guardian. Humbaba. He was not as stories had said. No towering beast. No monster dripping with fangs. Instead, he was immense. Yes, but quiet. His body was part bark, part stone. His limbs creaked as he moved. His eyes, 5 of them, blinked slowly, not with rage, but with sorrow. He had a face shaped by the wind and scarred by time. A crown of vines and moss rested upon his brow. His breath came in long, slow exhales, each one carrying the scent of distant rain, of soil pressed by ages. He looked at the two men, not with hatred, but with the sorrow of something ancient, seeing the youth of the world walk forward, unknowing. "You do not belong here," Humbaba said. His voice was low, not cruel. Gilgamesh stepped forward. "We came not to tear down the forest. We came to see its truth." "You carry blades," Humbaba said. "I carry dreams," said Gilgamesh. There was silence. Then the wind rose. Leaves lifted and danced. The ground shook softly, not with threat, but with presence. Humbaba spread his arms. The trees bent inward, as though listening. Even the light changed, becoming a dusky green that pooled at the edges of the clearing. And then, softly, Humbaba asked, "Would you destroy what remembers the silence before your cities were born?" Gilgamesh did not answer. He looked to Enkidu, and Enkidu, heart heavy, said no, but the gods placed this path before us, and we follow it. The guardian closed his eyes. Then he stepped forward, and the forest, for the first time in centuries, held its breath not out of fear, but out of grief. The clearing was still, not silent, but waiting, like the breath held before a deep dive. The shadows stretched long and trembling beneath the canopy, and the air pulsed with the slow heartbeat of ancient wood. Gilgamesh stood steady, axe in hand, the weight familiar and grounding. Enkidu, beside him, muscles coiled like the spring of a river, eyes sharp and steady. Humbaba's many eyes watched them, not with fury, but with the tiredness of a guardian forced to awaken from a long slumber. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying voices, old voices, warning, mourning, challenging. The forest seemed to lean closer, as if to witness what would come. Gilgamesh took a breath. The fight was not born from anger, nor from hunger for power. It was the meeting of two worlds. The city, with its stone and noise, and the forest, with its slow, patient growth. The desire to know. The need to test. Enkidu stepped forward. "Guardian," he said, voice low and steady, "we come not to destroy your home, but to walk through it and bring back what is forgotten." Humbaba's eyes narrowed. "Words are soft," he said, "but the forest remembers sharp blades." Gilgamesh raised his axe. The strike was not swift. It was a slow beginning, a test, a question asked in the language of wood and iron. The clash rang out beneath the trees. Not a roar, but a murmur. Branches snapped. Leaves fluttered down like snow. The earth beneath their feet trembled softly. Humbaba moved with surprising grace for something so immense, his arms like bending trunks, his steps like shifting stones. The battle was long. Neither side pressed with cruelty. Neither sought to spill more than necessary. It was a dance, a slow, heavy, measured rhythm that echoed the pulse of the forest itself. Gilgamesh swung, and Humbaba parried. Enkidu leapt, and the guardian shifted. The air filled with the scent of pine resin and dust. Their breaths came hard, but not angry. And through it all, the forest watched. Watching as the two men tested themselves against the ancient power that had guarded these trees for centuries. Time stretched, until finally, with a heavy breath, Humbaba faltered. He sank to one knee, his many eyes blinking slowly. "You have strength," he said, "and respect, but the forest suffers." Gilgamesh lowered his axe. Enkidu knelt beside the guardian. "Tell us," Gilgamesh said quietly, "what is the forest's sorrow?" Humbaba's voice was a whisper now, barely more than the rustle of leaves. "Men come with fire and hunger. They cut, they burn, they forget. The trees weep. The earth bleeds." Enkidu looked to Gilgamesh. The king nodded slowly. "We will remember," he said. "Not just the city, but the forest too." The guardian closed his eyes. A wind rose through the clearing, soft and warm, carrying the scent of cedar and rain. And then Humbaba spoke once more. "Go forth, then. Carry this memory in your hearts. Walk gently." The forest sighed. The shadows lifted. And the battle beneath the trees ended, not in destruction, but in quiet understanding. The journey back was slower. The road home stretched beneath their feet like a ribbon unraveling through soft fields and shaded groves. The sun warmed the earth in long, gentle waves. Birds called softly in the distance, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and ripening figs. Uruk, once distant and dreamlike, grew larger on the horizon with every step. Gilgamesh walked beside Enkidu, the wild men now woven into the fabric of the city's rhythm. Their strides matched, not from necessity, but from a quiet harmony born of shared purpose and discovery. The forest and the city had touched, and something between them had changed. Along the way, they spoke little. Words felt too sharp for the soft unfolding of thoughts inside. Instead, they listened to the whisper of barley fields, to the laughter of children playing near wells, to the slow murmur of the river winding toward the city's edge. The land was alive with stories. Stories not carved in stone or written on clay tablets, but told in the sway of trees and the curve of hills, in the shifting light and the steady pulse of time itself. When they reached Uruk, the city seemed both the same and new. Walls of baked brick glowed warm in the afternoon sun. Market stalls bustled with voices, colors, and smells. The river glittered beneath the bridge, and palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. But within Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the world had shifted. They no longer saw the city as simply their home or domain. It was a place of beginnings and endings, a place where the stories of men and nature met and intertwined. Gilgamesh paused at the city gates, the massive bronze doors etched with images of gods and heroes. He looked at Enkidu. "You have taught me what it means to listen," Gilgamesh said quietly. Enkidu smiled, a gentle curve of lips that spoke of wild places and quiet dreams. "And you have shown me the strength in stories," he replied. Together, they entered Uruk. Inside, the city's pulse was steady and strong. Priests chanted softly in temples, water flowed through stone canals, and children ran laughing between columns. But in the hush beneath it all, the memory of cedar forests and ancient guardians lingered, woven like threads into the city's heart. Gilgamesh and Enkidu would walk those streets for many days. They would sit beneath the great ziggurat and speak with scribes who told tales of gods and men. They would stand on the walls and watch the river's slow current, feeling the steady flow of time. And in the quiet moments between, they would remember the forest, the deep silence, the whispered secrets, the guardian's sorrow. The journey had changed them both, not by conquest or battle, but by understanding. And in that understanding, they found a new story, one that would grow, slow and steady, like the trees themselves. Night settled softly over Uruk. The city lights flickered like scattered stars, and the river whispered secrets beneath the bridge. The air was cool and still, holding the scent of jasmine and baked clay. In the quiet chambers of the palace, Gilgamesh lay awake, gazing at the shadowed ceiling. His thoughts were like slow rivers, winding, deep, and restless. He dreamed, not of battle or fame, but of something older and more elusive, immortality. The dream came like a soft ripple through his mind. He saw himself walking beyond the walls of Uruk, past the cedars and the river, to a place untouched by time. A garden where trees bore fruit forever, and the waters never dried. Where laughter and light never faded. But the dream was also tinged with a gentle sadness, a knowing that such a place was distant, perhaps unreachable. He turned in the darkness and saw Enkidu sleeping beside him, peaceful and still. The wild man's breath rose and fell like the steady tide. Gilgamesh's heart was heavy. He wondered if the immortality he sought was found in stories, in the echoes left behind when a man was gone. He thought of the forest guardian, Humbaba, who had taught them about the slow passage of time and the sorrow carried in ancient roots. He thought of the city, where every stone was a memory, every brick a song. And he thought of Enkidu, whose friendship had opened a new world, a world where the wild and the civilized met in quiet understanding. As dawn approached, Gilgamesh rose and stepped to the window. The sky was pale blue, the first birds beginning their morning song. He whispered a prayer to the gods, to Ishtar, to Anu, to the stars above. He prayed not for endless life, but for meaning, for the strength to walk his path with honor, for the courage to face the unknown. And in that prayer, he felt a calm settle over him, a gentle light in the darkness. The dream of immortality was not just a place to reach, but a journey to live. And with Enkidu by his side, Gilgamesh knew he would walk it slowly, carrying the stories of the past, the present, and the future within his heart. The city of Uruk prepared for celebration. The festival was not loud or hurried, but a slow unfolding of light and shadow across the ancient streets. Lanterns hung from wooden beams, their soft glow bathing walls in warm amber hues. Palm branches swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the scent of sweet spices drifted through the air like whispered promises. Gilgamesh and Enkidu moved through the crowd with quiet reverence, not as rulers commanding attention, but as part of the city's pulse, a rhythm shared by weavers, potters, children, and priests. Their footsteps were light on the cobblestones, their voices low in conversation. The festival honored the gods of the city, the earth, and the river, those ancient forces that shaped life and time. It was a moment to pause, to remember, and to give thanks. Families gathered near the great ziggurat, where lamps floated on water basins carved from stone. The flickering flames reflected like stars caught beneath ripples. Music rose softly, flutes, drums, and the hum of voices blending into a gentle chorus. Gilgamesh watched as children chased one another beneath the glowing lamps, their laughter light and free. Enkidu smiled, resting a hand on the shoulder of a young craftsman shaping clay beside a fire. The city seemed to breathe in the light, each flame a heartbeat, each shadow a memory. As night deepened, the priests led a procession toward the temple. Lanterns bobbed like fireflies. The air was thick with incense and the rustle of ropes. Gilgamesh and Enkidu followed, their minds quiet, their hearts full. At the temple steps, the high priest spoke words older than the city itself, blessings for growth, protection, and the steady flow of time. Gilgamesh closed his eyes and listened. He thought again of the cedar forest, of Humbaba's sorrow, and the fragile balance between man and nature. In that moment, the festival was more than celebration. It was a promise. A promise to remember, to respect, to live gently upon the earth. The night wound on slowly, like a river carving its path. Lanterns flickered low. Music softened. And beneath the stars, two friends stood together, quiet in the glow of 1,000 lights. The Euphrates flowed slowly past the city walls of Uruk, its waters reflecting the fading light of day like a mirror held to the sky. Gentle ripples traced the surface, soft and steady, carrying whispers of distant lands and forgotten times. The river was a quiet presence, life-giver, witness, and keeper of secrets. Gilgamesh stood at the riverbank, watching the current. The city's bustle softened here, replaced by the low call of birds and the distant splash of oars. Fishermen pulled nets from the water, their movements practiced and calm. Women washed cloth in the shallows, their laughter mingling with the steady flow. Enkidu joined him, carrying a small basket of freshly caught fish. They settled on smooth stones near the water's edge, letting the cool breeze ripple over their skin. Gilgamesh spoke softly. The river holds stories, stories that never reach the walls of Uruk. Enkidu nodded. It remembers the wild places, the places we have forgotten. The river does not rush. It moves with time itself. Together, they listened to the gentle song of the water. The river spoke not in words, but in rhythms, ebb and flow, rise and fall, endless and patient. Gilgamesh dipped his fingers into the cool current, feeling its touch. He thought of the cedar forest, the guardian Humbaba, and the journey that had changed them both. The river was a bridge between worlds, the wild and the city, the past and the present. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the water blushed with soft pinks and purples. Shadows lengthened, and the first stars began to shimmer overhead. They watched as fireflies appeared along the reeds, tiny lanterns flickering in the twilight. The river's surface glimmered, as if the stars themselves had descended to rest upon the water. Gilgamesh turned to Enkidu. Perhaps the river's secret is this. Life is a journey between moments, flowing and changing, but always connected. Enkidu smiled, and in the flowing, we find ourselves. The night deepened, and the city's lights twinkled in the distance. The river continued its quiet song, steady, eternal, and full of gentle mysteries. The days grew short and soft as the seasons whispered their slow change over Uruk. The air held a cooler edge, and the sunlight draped the city in warm golds and fading ambers. Gilgamesh and Enkidu walked together beneath the open sky, their shadows lengthening across the earth like quiet companions. The final journey was not marked by fanfare or haste, but by a gentle unfolding, each step a meditation, each breath a prayer. They traveled beyond the city walls once more, beyond the fields and orchards, toward the horizon where earth and sky met in a muted embrace. The world felt vast and tender. Gilgamesh carried with him memories not just of kingship and battle, but of the forest whispers, the river's secrets, and the stillness found between moments. Enkidu, who once ran wild beneath endless skies, now moved with a measured calm, his heart entwined with both the wilderness and the city. As they walked, the landscape shifted, grasses gave way to stones, and the scent of cedar mingled with the crispness of early frost. The final journey was a quiet one. No words were needed. Their thoughts drifted like clouds, soft, slow, and without urgency. Gilgamesh gazed upward, where the first stars appeared, pale and steady. He felt the weight of time, both vast and intimate, cradling him in its steady rhythm. At the journey's end, they reached a gentle hill overlooking Uruk. From this vantage, the city lay spread beneath a veil of twilight, its lights twinkling like distant stars. They sat together, side by side, letting the silence settle like soft dust. In that stillness, Gilgamesh understood that the final journey was not an ending, but a continuation, a story woven into the fabric of earth and sky. The breath of the city, the murmur of the river, the sigh of the forest, all carried forward in quiet harmony. And as night deepened, two friends sat beneath the stars, connected by the journey behind and the journey still to come. The story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu does not end with a single breath or a final step. It flows beyond time, carried gently by the winds and whispered by the rivers, etched softly into the stones of Uruk and the rings of ancient cedars. It is an eternal story, one of friendship, discovery, and the quiet meeting of worlds. In the hearts of those who listen, the story lives on, unfolding like the petals of a night-blooming flower, slow, tender, and full of light. Gilgamesh's voice is found in the rustling leaves and the murmuring waters. Enkidu's spirit dances in the wild winds and the quiet spaces between stars. Together, they remind us that strength is not only in conquest or glory, but in understanding and compassion. That the journey toward immortality is not in escaping time, but in embracing the stories that outlast it. And so, beneath the wide sky of Mesopotamia, beneath the ever-watchful stars, their tale continues. Not as a loud declaration, but as a soft breath, an invitation to walk gently, listen deeply, and carry forward the whispers of the past. The eternal story flows on, like the river that nurtures the land, like the cedar that stands tall and silent through the ages. It is a story for all who seek the quiet light within the darkness, the steady warmth in the cold night. And it is yours to hold, to remember, and to share. And so the journey of Gilgamesh comes to rest, not in victory, nor in defeat, but in the stillness of understanding, in the hush of a starry sky, in the soft flicker of a lamp left burning through the night. From the cedar forest to the sacred river, from dreams carved in stone to the quiet laughter of a friend, the story flows on gently, endlessly. May you carry its whisper with you, not as a memory of kings and monsters, but as a reminder of the quiet places within your own heart. Thank you for walking this path with us. Sleep well, dear listener, and may your dreams be soft as the sands of Sumer.